In Mandev, death was not only an end, it was a ceremony of power, tradition, and final honor. The time had come. 14 nights had passed since the fall of their king, and as custom demanded, the body of King Malu was to be returned from Sigred to the palace, where the final rites would be performed before he was laid to rest. The people gathered in mourning, their voices low, their faces heavy with what they believed was truth. To them, their king was gone. To them, this was the end of his rule. But beneath the weight of that belief, something far more calculated moved in silence. The body that was carried was not Malu. Hidden within the careful planning of a king who refused to fall to betrayal, a different path had been chosen. Malu still lived, watching, waiting, calculating. The man they mourned was a substitute, a body prepared to carry the illusion to its final stage. Only a few knew the truth. General Philip stood among them, unwavering, his loyalty no longer questioned, but proven. It was he who had first uncovered the Queen's plan, he who had brought the whispers, the movements, the signs to the king before poison could turn into death. And together, with trusted nobles who placed kingdom above all, they reshaped the outcome. Yet even with the plan unfolding perfectly, Malu struggled with something no strategy could erase: disbelief. Not in the act, but in the heart behind it. Queen Sharon, his wife, the one who had stood beside him, shared his throne, carried his name, had truly intended to kill him. Not in anger, not in impulse, but in design. And what made it cut deeper was not just her betrayal, but the lie within it. She had not acted alone in ambition. She had tried to make it seem as though General Philip stood with her, as though the man she trusted most had turned against him. But that lie had failed. Philip had chosen his king, and in doing so had preserved more than a life. He had preserved the throne itself. Since the day of the king's casset, the queen had not been herself. She had waited, watched, expected power to settle into her hands, but something had felt incomplete. General Philip, the man she had once sought as an ally, had become distant, unreachable. He no longer stood beside her, no longer spoke with her, no longer gave her the presence she had once relied upon. And in that silence, suspicion began to grow. She did not yet know the truth, but she felt its shadow. As the procession reached the palace, the atmosphere shifted from mourning to ritual. Nobles gathered, guards stood firm. The final rites were to begin, and somewhere, hidden beyond sight, the real king watched his own burial unfold, his kingdom weeping for him, while he prepared to rise again, not as a victim, but as a ruler who had seen betrayal face to face and chosen to answer it, not with emotion, but with control. Far from Mandev, in the structured and resource-rich lands of Sigred, King Dalot received the message from Tyre. Aaron had accepted. Not with desperation, not with haste, but with understanding. The letter had been read more than once, its tone measured, its intent clear. This was not the response of a weak king seeking support. This was the response of a man who knew the value of alignment, and Dalot respected that. He did not delay his reply. A message was prepared, formal, respectful, yet warm in its delivery. He acknowledged Aaron's acceptance, affirmed the bond that was beginning to shape, and then went further. He would not leave this alliance to words alone. He would come himself, to Tyre, to stand before Aaron, to see the man behind the decision, to speak not through ink, but through presence. Trade would be discussed, terms refined, and most importantly, the union between their houses would begin to take real form. His daughter would not be promised from a distance. This would be done with clarity, with vision, and with purpose. Yet beneath the formality of his message, there was something deeper, something unspoken. Dalot was not simply responding, he was advancing, Step by step, connection by connection, he was placing himself at the center of shifting power across the Eastland. Tyre to one side, the Salt Isle to another, and now through movement rather than distance, he brought himself directly into the space where decisions would shape what came next. Across the Eastland, paths were beginning to cross more directly than ever before. A king prepared to rise from his own death. A queen stood on the edge of truth she could not yet see. Another king prepared to travel, not for war, but for something that could prove just as powerful. Because, sometimes, the most dangerous moves are not made on the battlefield. They are made in silence, in shadows, and in the moment just before truth is revealed.